A few months ago, I helped a friend find a vintage Star Wars toy. As a surprise thank you, he sent me the new LEGO Lion Knights castle from their 90th anniversary line. I was blown away, and I plan to make a dedicated video about it soon. But upon its arrival, the first thing I wanted to do was grab the childhood LEGO boxes out again. Because when I briefly collected space LEGO sets through 1983 and 1984, my brother collected castle-themed LEGO sets. To store our childhood LEGO collections, we each had our own carrying cases. When I did the video retrospective on space LEGO, there was no need to scour through my brother's stuff at the time. But when this massive castle arrived, I finally had a reason to revisit his collection. My brother never had nearly as much castle LEGO as I did space LEGO, but what he did have was from those mid-80s days when the LEGO castle system was a raw medieval landscape. No dragons or wizards here, just European dudes with edged weapons and early medieval metal helms looking for a fight. As with the space LEGO sets, I determined what he had through some cross-referencing of various parts, the number of minifigures, and other factors. And then it was off to Bricklink for the missing parts. When all was said and done, my brother had grown up with the Siege Tower, a pair of horse carts, and 2 sets he acquired the first few years we lived in England. The later iteration of the Castle minifigures set, and the camouflaged outpost, both of which incorporated the Forest Men. I suspect he wanted these because Robin Hood Prince of Thieves had made such a big impact on us at the time.
If it's fame you seek, Christian, I think you have it.
But that left this pile of older castle knights I couldn't quite place at first. There weren't any more bricks of decent size in his case to indicate another castle set that I could see. And given the red, white, and blue livery patterns on their shields and shirts, these weren't from our time in England. These had to be from 1983 or 1984. Looking at the paltry leftover bricks in the case, and taking some time online, I finally figured it out. This was a set called Knight's Procession, released in the United States in 1981, but having come out in Europe in 1979. It was a simple package of 6 soldiers and a pull cart. Among the soldiers were 4 swordsmen with flared helms, and 2 guards with halberds and the traditional Norman helms. As with all LEGO products, they made suggestions on the back of the box to turn this set into all kinds of things, like defense barriers and weapons racks with a camping table. But the intended design featured on the front of the set was of a small pull cart being hefted along by the 2 guards while the 4 swordsmen walked alongside. Inside the cart are a vague pile of various multicolored bricks of different shapes intended to represent something. And that's where I started to side-eye this thing as I built the Lion Knight's castle. I couldn't let it go. Something about this little LEGO set was nagging at my mind. Something was off about it, and it wasn't the very modern tire pieces used under the cart. I looked into the various castle sets from the time period, and most of them are pretty straightforward. Names like Siege Tower, Horse Cart, Catapult, Blacksmith Shop, Knight's Castle. Straightforward names that indicate what you're looking at from the off. This, on the other hand, Knight's Procession, was very specific in the name, but very vague and mysterious in the toy itself. The Knight's emblem was an early LEGO style that was never officially given a faction name, like the aforementioned Lion Knights or the popular Black Falcons, a couple of which had been included in my brother's later minifigure set. However, the lion emblem and the crossed weapons emblem on the figures that came with his Siege Tower set were eventually referred to as Crusaders at some point in the history of LEGO Castle, while also being called Lion Knights as well. Given that, something very medieval was going on in the state of Denmark. LEGO had the early Middle Ages on its mind with these first years of the castle system. Given that, what is the Knight's Procession supposed to be? My mind twisted this Rubik's Cube for days, and every plausible conclusion I came to was sobering. While the items in the cart are vague, the cart itself is not. This is not a horse-drawn wagon like the horse cart. This is a pull cart, just small enough to fit through a doorway or the narrow alleys of a medieval city. The innocent-minded person would say, oh, well, it's a supply cart for their food, bedrolls, and various sundries. But this isn't called Supply Wagon, and these are, according to the name of the set, Knights. These aren't run-of-the-mill conscripts or peasant fighters. These are guys who can afford horses. By definition, knights had horses. That's practically what made them knights. So if we accept these are knights, then the 6 warriors here are using a pull cart because they are coming from a place where horses were unable or inconvenient to be used, like a conquered city. This could be their spoils from a battle that just happened. If these were general supplies for travel, as we just speculated, they'd be in a horse-drawn wagon, like the Lego Crusaders cart, which was a wagon of supplies that had just been stolen from crusading knights by the outlaw forest men. Or it would have been a wagon akin to the horse-hitched hay cart with smugglers. Therefore, the Knights' Procession pull cart very well could be plunder, either stolen out of a ransacked village, a siege-ravaged city in the Holy Land, or possibly a waylaid merchant caravan. I mean, look closely and we might even find the head of Salah ad-Din's sister a ways back on the trail. But there's one more bit of evidence with this strange Lego set that pushes the likelihood of this being a mere plunder cart into a plausible theory, but not quite as close to the mark as the evidence allows. The name is very specific: Knights' Procession. If this was a simple supply or plunder cart, LEGO might have just called it supply wagon or supply caravan. And again, if that had been the case, I really think LEGO would have made this a larger horse-drawn vehicle. No, this name is very specific, and very unlike the names of the other castle sets, as we've already established. I've spent a good part of my spare time for 30 years reading about medieval history and the Crusades. It's the only other part of history besides World War II that I've really immersed myself in. In 1099, when the army of the First Crusade reached the walls of Jerusalem, they were dying of thirst and had been on a campaign across Europe and the Middle East for almost 3 years. And by that time, they had been whittled down to a fraction of the Crusaders they started with in Europe. And their initial assaults to lay siege to Jerusalem were not going well. They were easily repulsed. The army was ordered in an act of penance to march around the besieged city barefoot, while fasting and carrying with them a variety of holy relics, in homage to the biblical story of the siege of Jericho. After this act of purification, the army was inspired with renewed vigor according to the surviving accounts, and refreshed their siege engines and weapons. Mere days later, the crusading army managed to breach the walls and take the city, killing 40,000 people. This would be the only time in the history of the Crusades that Jerusalem would be in European hands, as it would fall to Salah ad-Din less than 100 years later. The barefoot march of penance around the city that reinvigorated the crusading army is now known as the Barefoot Procession. Could this Lego set be a reference to that procession? Certainly the knights would have been on foot during this event, as that was part of the display of humility. And could this pull cart be carrying some of the holy relics they were purported to march with during their penance? As this procession was inspired by Joshua's march around Jericho in the Old Testament with the Ark of the Covenant, could the object in the cart, vague and abstract as Lego bricks make it, ostensibly be a replica of the Ark of the Covenant made by these knights to bring with them on the Barefoot Procession? My God. However you look at this set, the Knights' Procession is easily the most enigmatic castle-themed LEGO set ever produced, due to the specificity of the name juxtaposed against the abstract yet hint-filled composition of the LEGO set itself. What I do know is this is no supply cart. The question is, have they just left a slaughter, or are they about to head into one of the most notorious in history? It's one or the other. Kinda makes those vacant, smiling LEGO faces a little creepy, doesn't it?
Can we please go back to the normal universe now?
Sure. See you on the next video, everyone.